Hello, my name is Odysseus Prometheus III, and welcome back to Pokemon Fire Red version. Okay, so the next stop we have for our journey is the Saint Anne. So, I could go through here and, just skip around, but instead I thought I'd do something kind of scripted this time. I wanted to do something a little bit, less of me just kind of rambling and more me structured rambling, but anyway, that place that I just went into is where I will heal when I'm on the Saint Anne. I don't know why I needed to tell you that. I'm already rambling, and the point of this episode was for me to not ramble, and it's already happening, so that's just perfect. Anyway, so you guys will just kind of be seeing a montage of me fighting different people while I just kind of go through different Pokemon types and just give explanations of why they are either good or bad against something. Now it could be something like real world advantages or even just balancing the game out, because in some cases that might totally be the case. But yeah, these are just kind of my ideas of why this and why that. So yeah, I'm going to start off with fire. What is fire strong against? Fire is strong against grass, ice, bug, and steel. Now pretty much all of these are obvious. Grass and bug. You burn it, it's dead. With steel and ice, you melt it with heat and with fire, heat, etc. So fire is pretty much the most straightforward, along with its weakness. Because fire's weakness is water, ground, and rock. Water because, water puts out fire in the most, basic understanding of putting out fire. Ground is there because that's another one. You put sand on top of fire, it's going to go out. And rock has a similar situation of, it would smother the fire, or I guess in this case, just hit it so hard that it just goes out. But yeah, that's fire. Moving on to grass. Grass is good against water, ground, and rock. The reason for grass being good against water, my ideas of it is because, you water plants, and plants absorb that water, so it would be good at, I guess, combating it in some way, and just being able to not be hurt by it, which one of grass's, resistances is, of course, water. The reasons I've already said. The other two are ground and rock. These ones, I feel like it's kind of a similar situation. A plant will grow in the ground. It gets nutrients from the ground. It takes away from the ground. So that, and I guess, and so many times rock and ground are just clumped together. So it's just kind of that situation. But yeah, grass is weak against fire, poison, flying, and ice. Fire and ice are pretty obvious. Just because if you just, we've already discussed, fire burns grass and plants and such. Ice freezes them Poison. Poison in the Pokemon games often has to do with pollution. There we go. Poison a lot of the time is also pollution with, things like sludge or smog, which is why it's good against plants, because it chokes them out. And then flying, birds eat seeds. That's it. Birds eat seeds. That's why flying is good against grass. You heard it here first, although you probably didn't even hear it here first. Who knows? Anyway, next up is steel. Steel is good against ice, rock, and fairy. Now, I can understand rock and fairy, and I'll get to those in a moment, but ice, I feel like that's a balancing. Just something there to kind of balance out the different types. Because if I'm thinking about ice, the first thing I would go to is almost definitely fire. I wouldn't even think of any sort of like metals being implemented to get it, except maybe like an ice pick. I guess that might totally be the thinking, or might just be balancing. I don't know. Who knows? I certainly don't, because I said it. The reason why it's good against rock and fairy is because the way you excavate rock is usually with steel and metal tools and things like that. That one's pretty obvious. And the reason why it's good with fairy is because it actually goes to the mythology surrounding fairies, or at least some fairies. It's not a universal thing, I don't believe, but a common thing for fairies is that iron, and by extension steel being made from iron, is the bane of fairies. It's poisonous. It's lethal in strong amounts. So that's why steel is good against fairy. Now the things good against steel are ground, fire, and fighting. All of them are fairly obvious to why. I mean, fire, we've already discussed. Ground, well, maybe not really obvious. They're kind of balancing, but they also seem to make sense. Just because ground, tends to focus on, in a way, taking down an opponent's weight, because the first ground move that I usually think of is Earthquake, and the bigger they are, the harder they fall, that kind of stuff. And then fighting, I have a feeling the reason fighting is good against steel is the same reason why it's good against rock, because fighting things just break anything that is considered to be super tough. Just gonna go with that. Next up is ice. Now, ice is good against grass, ground, flying, and dragon. Ice is good against a fair amount of things, including, something that's, as I've mentioned a trillion times already, overpowered in the early games. But ice was also, almost non-existent in the early games, with only, Blizzard, Ice Beam, and maybe, Aurora Beam, and I think that might have been, the only ice moves. I don't even know if, Powdered Snow or Icy Wind were moves until the next two generations. They might have been. Maybe Icy Wind. I kind of doubt it with Powdered Snow, though. Anyway. But yeah, ice is good against grass. We already discussed that one. It's good against ground because if water seeps into, the ground and it begins to freeze, then it expands and it cracks up and breaks the ground that it's in, which would also be a really good argument for ice being good against rock, but isn't. But rock and ground are so often paired together that it might as well be. There are so few Pokemon that are just ground type and not rock type and not ground, just comparatively to the amount that there are rock and ground. With flying, a bit morbid, but you freeze a bird, it's gonna die. If it gets, like, if birds get frost on their wings, they'll probably, like, it makes the wings brittle and they can easily injure themselves. And then dragon, I like to think of that one as, like, dragons are in some way or another like dinosaurs. It's just like, or heck, you could just make them lizards. Cold-blooded, you freeze something that's cold-blooded, it's gonna go dormant at the very least. What's ice weak against? Steel, rock, fire, and fighting. We've already talked about steel and fire. Rock, smash ice with rock. There you go. I'm just taking that one. And then fighting again. Okay, for the most part, just like thinking about it, fighting is such a just balanced type. Just the type that balances everything out. Because if it's just like, this thing has a bit too few weaknesses, or is good against a bit too many things, or resistance against a bit too many things, what should we, give it to fix that? Fighting? I mean, fighting breaks stuff, so you could fracture ice, break metal, break rock, that kind of thing. Okay, we also need something that's good against normal. Anyway, I'll get to fighting in a second, but yeah. Yeah, so that's the end of ice. Moving on to ground. Now, ground is good against fire, which we've talked about, electricity, poison, rock, and steel. Now, the reason why ground is good against fire, sand, we talked about that. Wrong room. I would say the reason why ground is good against electricity and electricity is bad against ground is because it's not a conductor. Like, that's pretty much it. Like, it does not conduct electricity. And maybe you can, like, just completely interrupt the flow of electrons by just dumping a bunch of dirt on top of an open circuit. I honestly couldn't tell you. I can't tell you why. Ground, right. Why is ground good against poison? Honestly, I don't think there's a reason. I mean, there might be something like, you can, like, smother toxic waste with sand and dirt. I really don't know. I don't know why ground is good against poison. Most likely, it's just a balance. Ground being good against rock is a fairly obvious one. It's erosion. Plain and simple. It's the ground. Ground a lot of the time is like things like sand, as I've kind of alluded to previously. But yeah, like, it's sand weathering down the rock. It's just simple erosion, that's all it is. Or, like, an earthquake comes through and just smashes the rock up. And then steel, it's one that could be easily argued for similar reasons to rock, and like why fighting is good against steel and things like that. Or even why steel's good against ice. They all more or less make sense for the same reasons. Ground is weak to water, ice, and grass. We talked about grass already, but they kind of all go together. And we talked about ice. The only one we didn't talk about was water. Again, it's similar things to the rock situation. To the ground being good against rock, it's erosion. It's just like, it erodes it away, it sweeps it away. It gets mixed together with it. Just all these different reasons why ground would be weak against water. Moving on to fighting. As I said I would. Fighting is good against normal, ice, rock, dark, and steel. The one that I can see, well actually the two that I can see the most actually, now thinking about it a little bit more, are normal and rock. And ice to an extent. And I guess with that kind of steel, but less. Anyway, the reason why it's good against rock, as I've said, like, we've probably all seen either live or a video or something, or even if it's just a cartoon of someone doing it, the guy who's like a black belt who like breaks a bunch of cinder blocks with his face. That's why fighting is good against rock. Pretty much the only reason, among others. The reason why fighting is good against normal, this actually brings up, like, people. Like, someone who is trained in martial arts and is, like, a fighting type human. I can't believe I just said that, but that's what it is. A fighting type human would be very, very good against a human who is not fighting type, who does not know how to do these things, and I am asleep now. The only one that I honestly have no idea why fighting is good against it, like, I can't think of one. I honestly cannot think of a reason why fighting is good against dark. Like, if you guys have an idea, tell me. Tell me why fighting is good against dark, other than it would be a good balance to the game. Because not a lot of things are good against dark. I'm gonna tell you right here and now. Very few things are actually good against dark. There are 3 of them, and 2 of them don't make sense. But yeah. Anyway, moving on from all that, fighting is weak to flying, psychic, and fairy. Now flying, I don't know. Someone who could fly could beat up a martial artist. I don't know. It seems like a balancing one. It always seemed to make sense to me as a kid. So maybe there's something there. But that's it. Psychic, mind over matter. Brain over brawn. Whatever version of that phrase you want to use for it. And then fairy, I don't know. I feel like it's a balancing one, but fairy is the type I am least familiar with. As I have mentioned, I've only ever played up to Gen 5. I have not played a single Gen 6 game, and I want to. I really, really, really want to get the remakes of the 3rd generation, as I've probably mentioned that I really want to get those. And honestly, I think I might just skip X or Y. I just really want to get... Oh, there's one more and then I'll heal. I just really want to get... Shh! I am a global police agent. I'm on the trail of Team Rocket. They're up to nothing good. Anyway, I don't know why I stopped to read that guy. I do, but I'm not going to tell you because it's not really important. But anyway... Like, it has no bearing on the game. At all. I just felt like it. That's the important part. Next up is Ghost. Ghost is weak to Psychic and Ghost. Again, it's kind of a balancer, but it's also kind of a, like, maybe fight fire with fire situation with Ghost, which oddly enough is a weird thing to say considering fire, you know, doesn't do well against fire in this game. But anyway, kind of the reason why I would guess Psychic is above it is because, like, a medium or whatever form of ghostbustering you want to do, they usually have some connection to, like, psychic worlds and or even religious practices, because psychic is also, along with being the mind and psychic type, it's also more or less the light type. So it'd just be like you use any of those situations to banish ghosts. Pretty simple. And then Ghost is weak against Ghost. We already talked about that. And Dark. Wait a second. Why is Psychic listed in the good against, but not... Just a sec. I always forget that the only reason why Psychic is good against Ghastly, Haunter, and Gengar is because they're part poison. So yeah, I kinda mixed those up. Ghost is good against Ghost because fighting fire, I guess. The reason why Ghost is good against Psychic, you know what, I'm actually going to save that for when I get to Psychic. But Ghost is weak to Dark because Dark is another balancer. Dark and fighting are balancing, to be honest. Except for one situation with Dark, which I'll get to later. Oh look, Psychic's the very next one. Great! So Psychic is good against fighting, we talked about that one. But Psychic is also good against poison. I'll go back to my light analogies. Purification, I guess. Probably also balancing. Anyway. But the ones that I really wanted to talk about were Psychic's weaknesses, which are Bug, Dark, and Ghost. Bugs, Darkness, and Ghosts are three of the most common fears / phobias there are. So it just makes sense that the Pokemon type representing the mind is all about its weaknesses are fear. Plain and simple. Okay, moving on to Dragon. The only thing Dragon is good against is Dragon. Because if it was good against literally anything else, it would be more overpowered than it already was in the first 2 generations, and I've talked about this too much. Luckily, Dragon has kind of been balanced a bit better in the very recent time of Gen 6 with the addition of Fairy. Fairy being good against Dragon. Honestly, the only reason that I can really think of for this situation is fairy tales are where dragons get defeated. There might be something deeper, there might be more stuff, I don't really know. But it works for me. It's something to remember, which is really the reason for why I'm telling you a lot of these things. These are the ways that, like, I remember them or associate them, or just kind of how they go. So after dragon is bug. Bug is good against grass, psychic, and dark. Now, I know why it's good against psychic, dark. It doesn't make sense to me again. But with grass, the reason why bugs are good against grass is because bugs eat grass. Like, they eat plants, they devour them. You send a swarm of locusts on crops, those crops aren't going to be able to fight back. Pretty simple. Bug, rock, fire, and flying are good against it. Birds eat bugs, that's flying. You smash a bug with a rock, that's why rock's good against it. And fire we talked about. Okay, electric. Electric is good against water and flying. The first one is pretty obvious. Water conducts electricity. Pretty simple. Though technically not pure water, but we don't need to get into that. And then flying. Birds are up high and they'll get struck by lightning. And if you hit a bird with lightning, it will die. Fun fact. We've talked about electricity's one weakness, ground, already. It's just not a conductor, I guess. Throw that dirt on top of an open circuit, it's not going to connect. Anyway, next up is rock. Rock is good against fire, we've talked about ice, we've talked about flying. I'll get to bug, we've talked about. Okay, the reason why it's good against flying is because you can kill a bird, is killing two birds with one stone. That's saying. That is why. That's the whole reason. There you go. Next up is poison. Poison is good against grass and fairy. Grass we talked about, pollution and such. But fairy, I guess because it's a pollutant again. Like, fairies are often linked pretty closely to nature. So if you, like, destroy nature with your poison, you're probably gonna kill the fairies. There you go. Flying. Flying is... Oh, sorry, I didn't say poisons. We've already done both ground and psychic for poison. So there's that. Flying. Flying is good against grass, fighting, and bug. We've talked about all of these. Grass, seeds, fighting, flying, person beats up martial artist. Bug, birds eat worms, Mr. Pokemon Trainer. That is a quote from Misty. Yeah. Weak against, we talked about electric, rock, and ice already. So yeah, that's probably how the last few are gonna go. Normal is strong against nothing. Absolutely nothing. And is only weak, and only is weak to fighting. Granted, it also can't hit Ghost, which I don't believe... Yeah, I haven't been mentioning them, but this list does not contain what is not effective. Like, Psychic is not effective against Dark, for example. I don't think Dragon's effective against Fairy, or if it is, it's only half effective, but I'm not 100% on that. Okay, so next up is water. Water is good against fire, ground, and rock. Talked about all of them. It's weak to electric and grass. Talked about them. Fairy is good against fighting, dragon, and dark. Why, kinda understand, and why? I mean, I guess fairies would like banish darkness, I guess? I'm just throwing something out there. And then we talked about its weaknesses of poison and steel. And then the last one is dark. Dark is mainly there to balance out Psychic and Ghost, because they were pretty much going head to head, nothing else getting in between them. Psychic far more overpowered than Ghost, because Ghost was like, only good against Psychic and itself. Whereas Psychic is good against, granted, it's, just fighting and poison, but it's also very powerful and very good with special attack, which I don't think was actually a thing in the first generation. And we have just beaten, I believe, the last shipmate on the boat, and I just finished that entire spiel. So I'm gonna get the berries from the trash cans, and then next episode we're gonna go visit the captain. I really hope nobody stands in our way. But anyway, my name is Odysseus Prometheus III, but you can call me Odie. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you later. Hey, 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 you should subscribe.